Your child gets one less grape than their sibling. The room goes silent. Then the words come out, sharp and certain. That's not fair. You've heard it 1,000 times. Over grapes. Over turns. Over who got the blue cup. It feels like a small complaint. A tiny tantrum about tiny things. But the real answer is far stranger than a picky kid counting grapes. Because your child isn't actually upset about the grape. Not really. They're reacting to something much older than grapes, much older than you, much older than language itself. Something wired so deep into the human brain that it shows up before a child can even talk. Something scientists have traced back to infants who can't yet walk, let alone whine. Here's the strange part. Fairness isn't something you teach your child. It's something they arrive with. In 2008, researchers Ernst Fair, Helen Bernhard, and Bettina Rockenbach ran an experiment with children as young as 3. They gave kids the chance to share candy with another child. At 3 years old, most kids kept almost everything for themselves. Selfish. Predictable. Exactly what you'd expect from a toddler. But by age 7 or 8, something flipped. Children began splitting things evenly. Not because a parent told them to. Not because a teacher graded them on it. Something inside their own developing brain started demanding balance. That's the twist most parents never hear. Fairness isn't a lesson you install. It's a switch that gets flipped on by the brain's own timeline. So why does a 5-year-old scream about grapes, but a 9-year-old barely blinks? Your child's brain is going through what neuroscientists call moral development, and it doesn't arrive all at once. Think of it less like a light switch and more like a dimmer, slowly turning up over years. Jean Piaget, one of the first psychologists to map this out, noticed that young children judge fairness almost mathematically. Equal pieces, equal turns, equal everything. To a 5-year-old, fairness means identical. It's rigid. It's black and white. There's no room yet for nuance, like one sibling needing more help because they're younger, or one turn taking longer because the game demands it. That rigid sense of fairness isn't a flaw. It's a stage, a necessary one, and it starts far earlier than anyone expected. At Yale, researcher Kylie Hamlin ran studies with babies who were barely old enough to sit up. She showed them simple puppet shows. One puppet helped another puppet up a hill. One puppet blocked it, shoving it back down. Then she let the babies choose which puppet to reach for. Over and over, babies as young as 6 months reached for the helper. They avoided the one that caused harm. 6 months old. No language. No lessons on kindness. No sermons about sharing. And still, something in their tiny developing brain already preferred fairness over cruelty. Which means your child didn't learn to care about fairness from you. They were built with the instinct already loaded in. Your job was never to install it. Your job is to help it mature. But here's where it gets even stranger. Fairness in the human brain isn't just about logic. It's about pain. When researchers scan the brains of both children and adults during moments of unfairness, a very specific region lights up. The anterior insula. It's the same region that activates when you feel disgust or when you're in physical pain. Being treated unfairly doesn't just annoy your child's brain. It hurts it, literally, in a way that overlaps with the same circuitry that fires when you stub your toe or smell something rotten. So when your child screams about a grape, they're not exaggerating for effect. Their brain is registering something closer to an injury than an inconvenience. Does that mean every meltdown over crackers deserves a 5-alarm response? Not exactly, but it does explain why logic rarely works in the moment. You can't reason someone out of pain. You can only help them move through it. Now here's the modern mirror, the part that connects your child's grape tantrum to something you recognize in yourself. Adults do this too. You just call it something else. You call it frustration when a coworker gets credit for your idea. You call it resentment when a friend gets invited somewhere you weren't. You call it outrage when you see unequal treatment play out on the news. Same circuitry, same ancient wiring, same anterior insula lighting up in your adult brain exactly like it does in your 5-year-old's. The only real difference between you and your child is regulation. Your prefrontal cortex, the slow-developing control center behind your forehead, has had decades more practice pumping the brakes. Your child's prefrontal cortex is still under construction. It won't be fully wired until their mid-20s. So when they feel that hot flash of unfairness, they don't have the same brakes you do. The feeling arrives at full volume, and there's no dial yet to turn it down. That's not bad parenting. That's basic biology. So what actually helps? Not lectures about gratitude. Not comparisons to kids who have less. Those miss the target completely because the issue is never really about the grape count. It's about whether your child feels seen and valued in the moment the unfairness hit. Psychologists who study children's fairness responses have found something counterintuitive. Naming the feeling works better than correcting the behavior. Saying something like "that felt unfair to you" does more to calm the nervous system than saying "it's actually fair, here's why." The second response tries to win an argument. The first response tells the brain, "someone understands what just happened to me." And when the brain feels understood, the anterior insula begins to quiet down. There's another twist hiding inside all of this. That rigid, black and white fairness your child clings to at 5 years old, it's not the end goal. It's a stepping stone. As the brain matures, that rigid equality slowly gives way to something more sophisticated. Psychologists call it equity, not equality. Equity means recognizing that fair doesn't always mean identical. Sometimes fair means one sibling gets more help with homework because they're younger. Sometimes fair means one child gets extra time because they're still learning to read. Your child's brain has to grow into that idea. It can't be rushed. It can only be modeled again and again until the dimmer switch turns up on its own, which means every time your child screams about a grape, something invisible is actually happening beneath the surface. Ancient circuitry, older than spoken language, is running a fairness audit in real time. A prefrontal cortex, still under construction, is trying and failing and trying again to keep that ancient alarm in check. And a nervous system that just wants one thing more than winning the argument: to feel understood. So the next time you hear those 4 familiar words, "that's not fair," try hearing them differently. Not as a complaint about grapes. Not as manipulation. Not as a character flaw you need to correct. Hear them as a very old, very human alarm bell, still learning how loud it needs to be. Because somewhere inside that small, furious voice is the same wiring that built centuries of human cooperation, human justice, and human trust. The same circuitry that lets strangers form societies, share resources, and build something bigger than themselves. Your child isn't overreacting to a grape. Your child is practicing being human.